As we begin another edition, a special edition of the Robert Scott Bell Show, covering the news in ways the mainstream media couldn't do, they would actually hurt themselves, and then we'd have to give them some homeopathic arnica montana. Mike Adams, the health ranger, is back with me here on the Robert Scott Bell Show to cover the latest. And, of course, the Oklahoma City area, Moore, Oklahoma, the devastation of tornadoes in, of course, Tornado Alley is brutal. Our hearts go out to all of those impacted. The loss of lives, especially children, it just hurts my heart, Mike, when we see this. But there's certainly some questions that I have about this.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. Obviously, it was a devastating tornado. A lot of people died, and our hearts go out to those families and those lost as well. But we see this over and over again. If you've lived very long on this planet, you notice that the news loves to report how many people died, whether it's a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, an earthquake, a bomb, whatever the case may be. Here's all these people that died. But they never ask the question, how could we have prevented some of these people dying? They never cover that, because that gets into having to think ahead. And when it comes to tornadoes, if you live in Kansas, you've got to be aware that it's Tornado Alley. I mean, come on, Wizard of Oz and everything else. If you're living in North Texas or Oklahoma, in this case, or Kansas or any of these areas, you got to know tornadoes are coming sooner or later. So what did our ancestors do? Our great-great-great-grandparents? They built tornado shelters. Even when they were living in poverty, they still...
This was, by the way, before the internet.
Yeah, right.
I mean, come on. They didn't need. This is the kind of thing that occurred to me. It really struck me hard, Mike. I'm thinking, if I lived in Tornado Alley, you could be darn sure I'd make sure I either had or had access to, for my family, I have two kids, access and a school, if they're going to be in school during tornado season, that there's actually a place that they can go underground.
Yes.
That just was
Yes.
stunning to me, to learn that these schools didn't even have that.
It's absolutely astonishing. I remember I grew up in the Midwest, and my elementary school, we had drills, tornado drills, because that was the most common threat. And they would take all the kids and lead us all down into the basement where we would take cover, duck and cover your
Yes,
heads,
yes.
whatever. And it was a pretty smart thing to do. Well, today they don't even build basements into the schools. They just build them so that the kids are trapped there, the roofs collapse, and everybody gets killed. So they don't think to build a basement. And then the homes that are being built don't have basements anymore either. And then very few people put in bomb shelters or tornado shelters or any kind of a root cellar or anything like that. It's so simple. If you are underground, you're not going to be killed by a tornado, period.
Yeah, that's the thing about, even modern medicine. When you ask the questions about disease, they always ask and focus on the disease and never question, well, how do the people that lived live and survive through it? And
Right.
that's seemingly the simple answer. Instead, here's where the media slant is just all wrong. Of course, it's a story. It's going to be front page on the Weather Channel and everywhere else, so to speak, because it's human interest and it's a tragedy. But where is the focus on what we're talking about? Preparation, preparedness. Instead, they're all praising FEMA for coming in after the fact.
I
Listen,
know.
if you've lost a loved one or a child, no, FEMA can't bring them back. That's the point of what we want to discuss today.
Yeah, well, you've nailed it. In the cancer industry, it's exactly the same as this tornado situation. Oh, look how many people died. Let's try to find the cure for cancer, but let's never ask what's causing it. How do we prevent cancer? If we could find the prevention for cancer, we wouldn't need to find the cure for cancer because people wouldn't get cancer. So,
Yeah, and at least the weather industry, the meteorologists are not so arrogant to say, let's find a way to stop tornadoes from happening.
right, right. Well, we know we can't probably stop tornadoes unless there's some really advanced HARP technology or something, but we know that we can stop ourselves from being damaged by them because look, most people that are killed by tornadoes are killed by flying debris. A tornado, 200-mile-an-hour winds will accelerate lumber and roofing materials and everything else, vehicles, to very high speeds. You get hit by a 200-mile-an-hour piece of wood paneling, you're dead. But none of this debris goes underground.
Hmm.
If you just put yourself 3 feet underground, you don't even need a very big root cellar. Just just small enough to crawl into, even a culvert. Just a culvert under a road. Crawl into that. There might be some spiders and bugs in there, but what the heck? You're going to live.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I mean, even from a low cost perspective, if you had to dig your own hole or ditch and create something makeshift, They've talked about survival mechanisms, even if you don't have access to a full-on root cellar or shelter, that being under or below will protect you from most of the debris in this case.
That's right. But I've noticed something about America is that people don't. That, I don't know if they're not educated about the laws of physics anymore. Like you're driving down the road, and you see these signs a lot in the winter across the Midwest. There's a sign as you approach a bridge. The sign says, "Bridge may freeze before roadway."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really? Is that because the wind blows underneath the bridge and over the bridge, and it doesn't have as much thermal mass as the highway, on the ground? I mean, come on. Do we need to be told that bridges freeze first? I mean, isn't that common sense? Do we need to be told that being underground during a tornado is the way to protect yourself? I mean, have we lost all of this knowledge of basic physics that our grandparents knew? I mean, our grandparents were all preppers, our great grandparents,
Yes.
and so on. We come from a long line of survivors and preppers. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, Robert.
Well, first a couple of years ago, you and I did the "Be Prepared, Not Scared" series on preparation. It was in different arenas and areas, but one of those was dealing with things like unexpected catastrophes and injuries and things, and that's another thing that's seemingly lost to most Americans who wouldn't know how to stitch or bandage a wound that was severe in these cases as well. And they have to wait for emergency personnel to come to them if they can get to them, or they have to go to a doc in the box or a hospital. So that's another aspect of being prepared.
Yeah, and I think what we have now is a culture of people who are so tied into the entitlement system and government's going to save us that even when it comes to a big natural disaster, a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, a lot of people just sit around and say, I'm just going to wait for FEMA. They don't think about, well, how do I live through this myself? Because no one's going to be here until this is over. So how do I survive right now? How do I save my children? Or even better yet, 6 months earlier, hey, we live in Tornado Alley. What could we have done different? What can we do now to make sure that we survive a storm that is inevitable? Now, I want to be clear. I'm not blaming the people who died. There is a luck factor in all of this. You could be a prepper and still get killed if you got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I'm not blaming them for their own deaths, but I am saying that maybe not nearly as many needed to die if some people had thought ahead better.
Well, and that's an interesting factor we got to bring into this equation, because even as we talk often on the Robert Scott Bell Show and at Natural News about the danger of modern medicine, and that it literally kills 784,000 Americans a year according to death by modern medicine. Our argument is not to say, well, some people are going to die because it's bad luck. Well, you might be able to argue that, or you might just say it's their time to go. But if they weren't taking the drug, maybe they'd still be alive. Or if they had the storm cellar, maybe they'd still be. So the point is, we don't give up just because we know we don't have 100% control over when it's our time.
No, but we have maybe in a tornado, I think you have at least an 80% control over your destiny. And there are really two schools of thought that try to excuse everybody from taking action. And one is the law of attraction school of thought, which says, oh, you created that tornado because you create your own reality, and that person died because it was their time to go, and their soul chose to die. I hear that from people.
Well, then it's just hang it up, give it up, don't do anything, right? That takes it to an extreme that I'm not willing to go.
Yeah, that's crazy. No, I remember someone telling me one time when there was news that a bus load of children rolled down a hill in Central America and all the children were died. And they said, well, they must have all agreed to go. I'm like, really? Really? No. I think they rolled down a hill and they died. I don't think they agreed. I don't think their souls agreed to do that. But then there's the other people who are just denialists. You tell them your house is on fire and they say, stop being negative. It's like,
yeah.
Or there's a tornado coming. Stop being negative. Who cares? Government's going to save us. FEMA will be here. Just denialists, just raw denial. And, those people actually have a much higher chance of being killed in these kinds of scenarios, which is in a sense kind of a twisted, weird Darwinism, natural selection thing going on.
Sure, but how many stories have we covered over the years where people said, nah, that'll never happen? And here we're looking back and going, we wrote about it and talked about it and thought, well, it's kind of wild that we're actually speculating that this might happen. And then, a few years later, you're looking back, it's like, wow, we were not only right, it's even worse. And of course, those folks say that'll never happen. They're the ones that are going to be taken out first, that rely upon the very government that will steamroll them.
Absolutely. And look, people live in such denial of the reality around them. Like, for example, when I used to fly, I don't fly anymore because of the TSA, but when I used to fly, I was apparently the only person who would fly in appropriate gear to survive any kind of situation, including just having a flashlight. Like nobody else has a flashlight, and I see people get on the airplanes with t-shirts and flip-flops, wearing flip-flops actually. And I've got like good footwear. If this plane goes down, I've got a light, I've got a little smoke hood, actually, a little portable smoke hood that you can put over your face, and you can actually survive, because most people die in plane crashes from smoke inhalation, not from the actual crash. So it's not being paranoid or anything. It's just being prepared. I mean, I'm prepared everywhere I go, and I think you are too.
Yeah, that level of preparation is something, again, that I acknowledge is foreign to my upbringing as an American speaking. And it's something that we're having to learn or relearn, or maybe, again, learn for the first time in a culture that has become very complacent, very relaxed, because a lot of stuff related to survival has not been front and center. We can expect reasonably that each day will go as the day before, outside of the occasional tornado that wasn't prepared for, but you could realistically prepare for that as well. Whereas in other parts of the world that I have visited, you as well, Mike, I've been to West Africa, where they don't know each morning they wake up whether they're going to be alive by nightfall. And it's a
Right.
whole different view of life when you're in that realm.
Sure, sure. But in America, we've got such worship of government. It's just insane that people think government is going to save them. It's almost like when I first saw the news that this tornado struck an elementary school and killed 20 children. My first thought was, well, ban tornadoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why doesn't the government just ban tornadoes? I mean, that's the answer that they think to everything else. Just ban tornadoes, ban earthquakes, ban hurricanes, because they
Sure.
think government is God, so
They
they
can
should just
take
pass
care
a
of it.
law.
Yeah, well, and that's the
Or no,
politically incorrect thing about the guns associated with the shooting that may have happened, of course, in places that we've reported on. And they say, well, ban the gun, never mind the person that took the gun in to do all of this damage.
right, right. Or even, how about the sign?
Hmm.
Why not just put a sign on the elementary school that says tornado-free zone?
Yeah, exactly. That's why we always laughed. It's a sad laugh, but when you see this school is a drug-free zone, except for the fact that 9 out of 10, or how many of those kids are on Ritalin or other medicines from Big Pharma.
Yeah. No, it's pretty sick. But if you look at the aerial footage of this tornado devastation, you notice that it just completely wiped out sh- entire neighborhoods of these homes. Now, I don't know if you've ever toured these neighborhoods when they're building them, but there are nationwide builders like KB Home, I think, is one of the companies. And if you look at them actually constructing these homes, they are nothing but toothpicks, which I'm calling the 2x4s, 2x4 lumber, which isn't even 2 inches
Yeah,
by
it's a
4 inches
stick build,
anymore.
they call them, and we could call it toothpicks relative to tornadoes.
Yeah, yeah. It's toothpicks and sheetrock, man. That stuff and the stones on the outside of the homes are all fake.
Yeah,
They aren't built out of stones. They don't have basements, nothing.
it's
These are
facade.
death traps.
Yeah, it is a facade, absolutely. And that's part of it. Now, government permits it. Those of you who say, well, if it wasn't for that, they'd be building it out of straw. Okay, you're exaggerating just a wee bit. And I don't want to disavow the reality of spiritual components to all life, because there is that. There is something larger that we couldn't necessarily put into mental construct all that well in these tragedies. So we're not in any way demeaning or belittling any of this, but recognizing that if you're living in a certain area, heck, if you're living under sea level in New Orleans and a hurricane comes, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, exactly. I mean, yeah, people build homes in a floodplain, and the answer, they think, is buy flood insurance. You know, folks, your house is going to get flooded. The floods happen again and again and again. And that's the thing about all these events that people see as being completely unpredictable, random things. They're very predictable. Over time, the same things happen over and over and over again to the same areas. But you have to have a big picture view of history and reality in order to see that. And most people are just living for the next paycheck, and that's it. They don't know anything about history. They don't project anything into the future. So we need to be better prepared. We need to be smarter about this, and we can save lives of more children from future tornadoes.
Not only learning history, but learning what's happening now as it relates to history. That's why you read Natural News every day. That's why you listen to Natural News Radio and the Robert Scott Bell Show, airing 3 to 5 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. right here on naturalnewsradio.com with Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. Thanks for being here with another update on a news story covered like nowhere else in media.
Thank you, Robert.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.